This is the second part of Michael and Mariantonietta's Asha's journey across the Sahara Desert. In today's episode, I look at the continuation of the difficulties faced by the traveling party. In addition to the scorching heat, which appeared to pour from the sky unabated, they faced the challenge of getting water. Before getting to Bin Sara, which was nicknamed the Christian's Well, they came across a group of people, men and women with camels, donkeys, and goats. They were offered food, and at last they had some kind of relief. Michael Asha was visibly relieved, but when they got to the well, they discovered it was dry. When they got to a place called Walata just before sunset, it was as if life was starting all over. There were sounds of drums and stringed instruments. This relief after the ordeal, the silence, and the loneliness of the desert was quite comforting. Walata seemed like a relief to them. Mahfoud, their faithful guide, was now supposed to go back to his family. It was imminent to look for a new guide. The first one that they got charged too much. When they refused to hire him, he threatened to deal with them. The second one appeared to be a good man. A local shopkeeper recommended him. The new guide knew his bearings well. The first guide who had threatened them had misled them. He had meant to kill them. He had given them the wrong directions. When eventually they found water at a place near the border with Mali, the camels were watered and fed on the fresh grass. On the next day, they made camp in Mali. There were some rains, and this was some kind of relief. On the way, they occasionally met nomadic people. On 6 September, they reached Timbuktu, the so-called center of gold trade since the 14th century. They stayed at Timbuktu for some time. Why was this so? This had been necessitated by the fact that they needed to get a new guide. They needed provisions. They also needed to exchange their ailing camel, Gafaf. The rain stopped, and it was now the period between the end of the rain season and the winter season. The effects of the first half of their journey was telling. It was difficult as they moved towards their final destination. It was like a mechanical routine. They were simply driven by the desire to go on. The most difficult part of their arduous task as they attempted to cross the Sahara was when they ran out of water. The heat was intense for both humans and their beasts of burden. Water was running short. They survived on rationing. The only way to survive was to save the little water that they had. Their final destination, the mighty River Nile, could only be imagined. The problems encountered in the desert, however, had a positive effect. It seemed to cement their relationship. They got closer to each other than before. On 7 November, they got to a town called Agadez, where they exchanged their 3 weary camels. They sold their camels to a man called Najim at the local market. Parting with the camels was torture for Michael and Mariantonietta. They had established a strong bond with what the Arabs called the gift of God. Camels had helped them to survive the harsh conditions. They stayed in Agadez for almost a month, and they were delayed because officials needed to give them permission to cross Niger. They needed to get 5 camels instead of 3. This was because they needed 2 to carry fodder, as there was no grass along the way. Their new guide, a man called Udungu, was 60 years old. The camels that they purchased were strong, but there was one which was old, and they referred to him as the old chap. On 13 December, they passed through the market where people cheered. In no time at all, they were out of the city. Their dream was continuing. One of their camels ran away, and the other felled the old guide, who crashed onto the ground. 3 solid hours were lost. Time was of essence. What with the month they had spent in Agadez. However, the trio did not despair. Mostly the trio would spend time in silence, each in his own or her own world. When cold, they would put on some warm clothing and stockings. Along the way, Mariantonietta fell from her camel and the animal became agitated. He roared, stamped on the saddle, and crushed it into pieces. It was beyond repair. They had to walk until they could replace the saddle. As the journey progressed, it became colder. There was no rest in the sheds. They just stopped for a few minutes for a cold meal. The change was sudden. The desert was desolate except for salt caravans. They were eager to contact fellow human beings, but that was a rare opportunity in the desert. It was difficult to stay on course. In the vast, empty sand sea, that is what Michael called it. The emptiness stifled them. They had no option. The Nile was beckoning. The land had no features, just sand, old metal markers, and shells of what used to be cars. The journey was so difficult that the trio marked time by using sunrise and sunset.